the story of Hollywood's most famous, Madam, a woman who, by the age of 27, was already making hundreds of millions of dollars, only to lose everything because of her own overconfidence, carelessness, and 30 grams of cocaine. Introducing elegant ladies to wealthy gentlemen is a very risky profession. On the one hand, it is merely a matter of arranging introductions, bringing people together, understanding their desires, anticipating their weaknesses, and playing a subtle psychological game. On the other hand, it is a world with no clear rules, where money flows like a river but vanishes just as quickly, and where a single mistake can cost not only a career, but one's freedom as well. In the world of big money, this profession can bring in a multi-million-dollar fortune, but if things go wrong, it can just as easily land someone in prison. And sooner or later, failure may overtake almost anyone who rises too far in the world of vice, a world of beautiful women, luxurious villas, drugs, expensive alcohol, private jets, famous and influential men, and of course, vast sums of money. A world where the boundaries of morality are blurred, and money becomes the only language spoken. This is the story of one of the most high-profile cases in this line of work. The story of the famous Hollywood, Madam, which began in 1988. At the time, there were three key figures in the market: Madame Claude, Madame Alex, and simply Madame. The last of the three, Heidi Fleiss, stood out in the sharpest contrast to the others. She was the youngest, the most successful, the most vulgar, and the most careless. Her business flourished for about 3 years, and then disappeared overnight. But the scandal that followed proved to be the most sensational of them all, because she promised to break the code of silence, traditionally observed in her profession. None of her predecessors had ever done so. Heidi Fleiss was born on December 30, 1965, in Los Angeles and was one of 6 children of the well-known pediatrician Dr. Paul Fleiss. At the age of 16, she dropped out of school, studied for a while at Valley College, and later attended Santa Monica College. She worked briefly as a waitress, after which fate brought her together with the financier Bernie Kornfeld. In 1988, she met Elizabeth Adams, who had long run a brothel in Beverly Hills. Adams's establishment catered exclusively to a wealthy clientele. But the chain of events that eventually led Heidi Fleiss into this business had begun even before Elizabeth Adams. It all started with Madame Claude. Madame Claude lived in Paris and was incomparable in every respect. At the age of 63, she looked 50 and could have passed herself off as the queen of virtually any country without fear of being exposed. Her appearance, taste, manners, and sense of dignity were captivating. She wore austere gray cashmere dresses adorned with pearls. She was the most remarkable madam in the entire history of prostitution. Her business flourished for 20 years, until the end of the 70s. She enjoyed protection from the presidential palace and the Ministry of the Interior. To practice prostitution under her protection was considered a great stroke of luck. To belong to the circle of her clients, whom she referred to one and only one way, as friends, was unquestionably a privilege. A privilege reserved for the rich and the well-born. An hour spent with one of her girls cost 1,500 francs in those still relatively inexpensive days. One evening, 8 o'clock at night until 2 in the morning, cost 3,000 francs. An entire day cost 5,000. Madame Claude was extraordinarily generous and limited her commission to 30%. She carefully cultivated romantic legends about herself, some of which undoubtedly were true. Her girls were able to carry on any kind of sophisticated social conversation. They could discuss the latest literary releases and the most talked about premieres. Without hesitation, they could explain what made the reign of Louis XIV so notable and state exactly when the French Revolution took place. She personally tested them and assigned homework, making sure they had a decent general education. She arranged plastic surgery for them and enrolled them in foreign language courses. The girls, from Madame Claude, were not summoned for 15 minutes to dubious hotels. They accompanied clients in society, were sent on lengthy trips to various parts of the world, and, in the end, were even married by former clients. It was said that for $10,000, she could arrange an intimate encounter with women who were not only beautiful, but also well known in high society. Madame Claude's influence was enormous. She knew the bedroom secrets of France's entire political and industrial elite. Presidents de Gaulle and Pompidou took care of her well-being. Her relationship with President Giscard d'Estaing turned out badly, and in 1977, she was charged with procuring and tax evasion. Madame Claude's outrage knew no bounds when she heard that the state wished to collect taxes from an activity it persecuted as immoral. She declared that she had no desire to make the French state her accomplice, and haughtily promised to pay taxes only after prostitution had been legalized. While waiting for that unlikely event, Madame Claude hastily withdrew to Los Angeles, where she spent what remained of her fortune, most of which had been confiscated by that same hypocritical state. Had she been able to continue her career in Los Angeles, she would have faced stiff competition, for Madame Alex lived in Los Angeles. Los Angeles differed from Paris only in style. Madame Alex was no less legendary than Madame Claude and ran her own network of 150 call girls, just as successfully for about 20 years, although she lacked the brilliant high society glamour for which Madame Claude was famous. Madame Alex's legendary status was of a somewhat different kind. She was an underground celebrity and used aliases. Some knew her as Alex Fleming, others as Betty Jensen or Elizabeth Adams. She took care to provide her activities with a legal cover and claimed that she dealt in antiques. Her mansion really was filled with antique furniture and old silver. But what she was selling had nothing to do with noble antiquity. Unlike Madame Claude, she preferred to rent out her girls for entire weekends, which brought in between $20,000 and $40,000. In her later years, her clientele consisted mainly of Arab princes and oil barons, whom the danger of AIDS left completely indifferent. Unlike timid Americans, she kept 40% of the earnings for herself, which seemed entirely fair to everyone involved. At the height of the business, her annual income, untouched by any taxes, reached $2 to $3 million. Not bad at all, considering that all her work amounted to answering telephone calls. Madame Claude's profession was one that an outsider would never have guessed. Madame Alex's profession, by contrast, was more or less obvious. But only her employees knew her by sight. In the late 1980s, an undercover officer from the California police got a job working for her and later came forward with a sensational expose. In any case, the evidence was enough to secure only a rather light prison sentence. She felt almost maternal toward her girls and constantly reminded them not to squander the money they earned. You should be saving it, and then you'll be able to pay for college. All of this is only the first step toward a respectable, well-paid profession. Then, during Madame Alex's arrest, her most talented protégé, and at that time the #1 call girl in her operation, first took control of Madame Alex's business while she was serving her prison sentence, and then went even further, winning over all of the girls and clients and opening a business of her own. In 1990, Fleiss opened her own elite brothel and acquired the nickname by which she is still known today, the Hollywood Madame. Heidi acted as a matchmaker for some of the richest men in the world, carefully selecting companions for them according to their every wish and fantasy. Her fee for these services was 40% of each deal. She was charged with running an underground prostitution ring and was arrested in the summer of 1993. Hollywood fell into a frenzy, the likes of which it had not seen in a long time. The Dream Factory owed this unpleasant development to a certain Sammy Lee, who drove up to Heidi Fleiss's villa in Beverly Hills in a Ferrari Testarossa, arranged a meeting with 4 of Heidi's girls at $1,500 each, and then discreetly requested, for an additional fee, a little cocaine as well. There was something about this client that Heidi did not like, but she ignored her suspicions. She was far too taken with the magnificent sports car. Many Hollywood moguls later cursed her for failing to listen to her own bad instincts. Heidi Fleiss's final client came from a very wealthy family, so the car really was his own. But he turned out to be an undercover police officer, all the same. Quite apart from the arrest itself, the incident had a number of immediate and unpleasant consequences, the most annoying of which was an avalanche of newspaper articles. Those articles revealed absolutely everything that the residents of Beverly Hills already knew perfectly well. But the thing they wanted least of all was to see it in print. Heidi, whom everyone simply called Madame, catered exclusively to Hollywood movie stars. Her operation, which came into being after Madame Alex had, so to speak, retired, was a model of luxury and extravagance. Her employees were recognized in stores and beauty salons by one telltale sign: when paying, they never pulled less than $1,000 out of their wallets. Unlike her predecessor, Heidi was not in the least concerned with discretion and became notorious for hosting unimaginable orgies at her villa, the one she had bought for $1.5 million. She possessed neither the style of Madame Claude nor the maternal instincts of Madame Alex. Her approach to the business was extremely pragmatic and utterly straightforward. As tradition dictated, she continued to take 40% of all the firm's earnings. Prices, meanwhile, started at $1,500 an hour. She had a charming little habit of recording on tape the words and sounds her clients made during intimate encounters. If the stars delayed payment for too long, she would play those recordings back to them over the phone via their answering machines. The most unpleasant of her habits was her habit of keeping detailed records. It was this bookkeeping, which a panic-stricken Hollywood referred to as nothing less than the little black book, that triggered fresh waves of indescribable terror. Madame Claude and Madame Alex never, under any circumstances and before no court, revealed the names of their clients. They knew a great deal, but they kept silent, and that combination ensured them a measure of safety through every twist and turn of fortune. Heidi Fleiss began giving interviews immediately after her arrest and kept at it for quite some time, though without ever naming anyone outright. More than anything else, her interviews resembled blackmail, the oldest profession's oldest companion. The question is, what, exactly, could seasoned inhabitants of Hollywood be blackmailed with, when even the most ignorant outsider knows that Hollywood is steeped in sin no less than the biblical Sodom and Gomorrah combined? The fact that famous actors sometimes enter into intimate relationships with barely acquainted women could hardly have caused a sensation, even in puritanical America. The news that stunned the United States was that they were paying money for it. It is commonly believed that Jack Nicholson receives so many letters from young and beautiful admirers that he has to hire an additional secretary. It is also commonly believed that all movie stars are romantically involved with one another, sometimes even taking those affairs so far as marriage. Such notions pleasantly excite the imagination of the viewer buying a ticket for the next screening. Heidi Fleiss's arrest forced the nation to confront a troubling question about the professional fitness of Hollywood's male half. If sex symbols have to pay large sums of money for sex, then what kind of sex symbols are they supposed to be? Madame's threat to make the contents of her little black book public unless she was paid $1 million placed more than one seven-figure fee at risk. It remains unknown whether she actually intended to do so or merely believed that a mild show of strength could do no harm under any circumstances. In any case, Heidi appeared at the preliminary hearing with an expression of restrained wariness, mild curiosity, and, on the whole, boredom on her face. On the faces of some of the spectators in the courtroom, however, there was unmistakable panic. The most comical failure of all belonged to Columbia Pictures Vice President Michael Nathanson. Immediately after Fleiss's arrest, he issued an official public statement declaring that neither he personally nor his studio had anything, absolutely nothing, to do with the affair. In his agitation, he entirely overlooked the fact that no one had yet asked him about it. Those among the alleged regular clients, whose names nevertheless surfaced, fought off the accusations in different ways. Mick Jagger, at whose request receptions were organized at Fleiss's villa, events more commonly known as orgies, apparently decided that nothing could damage his reputation any further, and so he remained silent. Jack Nicholson quite reasonably assumed that his fame would suffer no harm. Everyone was well aware of his numerous love affairs, which, without doubt, had not cost him a penny. Film directors are rarely sex symbols, so Oliver Stone did not deny much of anything either. Popular singer Billy Idol, for some reason, referred all the curious inquiries to his press secretary. The press secretary would say that Mr. Idol had no need for prostitutes, since women were already practically throwing themselves at him. The hardest blow fell, once again, on Columbia Pictures, the same company whose vice president had so imprudently rushed forward with explanations no one had asked him for. Had he not done so, it would never have occurred to anyone to start digging through the budgets of a film studio that cast none other than Schwarzenegger-ing roles. Suspicion never quite reached Schwarzenegger himself, but the accounting department revealed some mysterious gaps. The budgets for certain films included multi-thousand-dollar shoots for scenes that had never existed in the script. The explanation was simple. During production, the producers, with the help of girls supplied by Fleiss, kept the male half of the crew in a lively working mood. And, to some extent, they quite reasonably believed that such expenses ought to be covered by the film's budget. The studio did not object, the actors did not object, and the girls did not object. Only the police, for some reason, objected. Though why exactly this should concern the police, who understand absolutely nothing about the creative process, is another question. It is hardly surprising that the investigation found very few witnesses willing to give any testimony at all. As a result, Madame Fleiss was soon released on $100,000 bail, pending the emergence of new circumstances. Heidi Fleiss was also accused of agreeing to procure 4 women and 30 grams of cocaine for an undercover police officer. In 1993, the state of California charged her with 5 counts of pandering. The case went to trial, and the jury found her guilty in 3 of those incidents. The court sentenced Fleiss to 3 years in prison. In 1996, she filed an appeal, during the course of which it emerged that some of the jurors' votes had been bought and that other violations had also taken place. However, a year later, Madame found herself back in court. This time, she was charged with tax evasion and money laundering. In September 1996, she was convicted on federal charges of tax evasion and sentenced to 37 months in prison. Fleiss served 20 months at the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, California. On November 19, 1998, she was released and sent to a rehabilitation center on the condition that she complete 370 hours of community service. After her legal troubles had somewhat subsided, Fleiss launched her own clothing line under the brand name Heidi Wear. In 2005, she planned to open a sex boutique in Los Angeles called The Little Shop of Sex, as well as establish a legal brothel in the state of Nevada that would be an exact copy of the White House. Heidi Fleiss also wrote several compelling books in which she described the specifics of her work and shared the finer points of dealing with clients. For now, the little black book, once offered for sale at $1 million, is being read only by the police, free of charge,